Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we are going to be looking at our first new deck from the Ultra Prism set, and obviously we don't have the cards on TCG yet, so it's going to be one of these slideshow videos, so I hope you can bear with us while we get this content out to you, but we are going to be kickstarting with one of the coolest new GX Pokemon, the Leafeon GX, and having the Decidueye as one of the supporting members. Now, this isn't going to be the only Leafeon deck we look at, but this will be the first one to cross off the list. So we'll start off with the basic concept, then we'll look at the list itself, and from there we'll look at its matchups and have some closing thoughts on how powerful we think the deck will be. So here is the basic concept. This is what Leafeon GX does and what it adds to the deck. The Granbloom GX attack is the new GX attack that you'll be trying to use in this archetype to help you build up your board full of Decidueye GXs. It allows you to pretty much Evo Soda every one of your bench Pokemon, and that's insane in combination with things like Brigette, so that you can sometimes get 3, maybe even if you're very lucky, 4 Rowletts into Dartrix, and that's absolutely insane. We also play other Eevees, which can also evolve into Leafeons to give yourself more abilities. And we even play a 1-1 line of Zoroark in our list as well to give you the draw engine, get it online straight away. So Granbloom is an incredible GX attack. It definitely changed the style of the deck. Decidueye, obviously, with its own GX attack that has been proven to be very powerful. We no longer have that option if we go for the Granbloom, so it's a lot less of a controlling deck in that regard, but we have to make up for it with different counts in our list than Decidueye is used to. And this attack really gets you on the board early, and that's really nice because as soon as you get multiple Decidueye GX out, we all know how powerful and flexible its damage output can be, and how simply you win games because of having multiple feather arrows every single turn. So first off, it's all about the GX attack. That's one of the main reasons why we pair Leafeon with Decidueye, because you can get into this amazing Stage 2 Pokemon very, very efficiently and very often. Having the Solar Beam attack as well can help out when you progress your board state and start going into the offensive stages. Once you've used your Granbloom, you can start going for these Solar Beams. It's only doing 110, but we have multiple Feather Arrow pings to get you there, and it's just in general getting 2 hit KOs, so it's good pressure around the board and can be a decent attacker for keeping your Decidueye safe on the bench. And then its ability is also a great help to you. Breath of the Leaves, as it's been translated to, denies or can sometimes help deny 2 hit KOs from some of these decks that are trying to deal around like the 120 base mark with Golisopod and with Zoroark GX, and doing this little heal of 50 on something like a 240 HP Decidueye is going to be really good for you, especially if you can use it multiple times with the use of float stoning into other Leafeons, or even going for Guzma plays and getting, again, multiple Leafeon heals going. It can be a really nice way to fully heal some of your Decidueyes, or at least keep them protected for an extra turn, and that's what's really important here. It's also really nice for helping you against opposing devolve strategies. One of the big parts of our own deck is that we're going to try and devolve a lot of people with lots of setup Feather Arrows and then go for the big Miraculous Shine play, but having our own Leafeon GX can help us out in defending against these approaches from our opponents. So think about things like Zoroark Decidueye, which is currently an archetype. Well, you may have the edge in that matchup because you're likely to get more Decidueyes in play in the first case scenario, so they can't really do their healing shenanigans quite as effectively. They can't really go for Ace of Rollers because they'll never be able to bench another Zorua because you've got 3 Decidueyes on your board. And additionally, if they're trying to go for devolve approaches, we have this amazing Leafeon GX ability. As long as we have energy on the Decidueyes, we can start healing them up and making sure that they won't be just cheesed out by a Miraculous Shine. And also, because we're not playing rare candies, if they ever go for it on our Dartrixes, it's a lot more for them, lots more HP, and also we can simply replay them if they've not been knocked out. So overall, really, really nice. The heal is really good. So let's look at the Pokemon for this list. We are going to play a 3-2 line of Leafeon GX. As we all know, there is the Energy Evolution Eevee, which we're going to take full advantage of here, so we can get into our Leafeons ASAP. So we can use this Granbloom. Hopefully, if we combine it with a Brigette, we can use it on our first turn if we go second, which is incredible, moving those Rowletts that we play lots of into Dartrix. So then hopefully the following turn we can go into Decidueyes. This is actually a deck that doesn't mind going second at all, as long as you can actually get into your Leafeon GX alongside Brigette. It can be very, very powerful. So I think the Leafeon at a 3-2 line is pretty good. We play a lot of switching cards in here to try and get into your Eevee, but also having quite a high count of it in the first instance is pretty good. You could go for a full 4 count, but I think with 3 Floatstone already in the deck, it's pretty safe to just go for the 3-2 line. 3-3 Leafeon seems kind of high. You want to have as many Decidueye out as possible, so it feels like a dead card. We're going to max out on the Decidueye for all the pieces, because we're not playing any rare candies in the list. It's something that we could be playing, so that we're less all-in on the Grand Bloom. But right now, I just want to go for a baseline list for the Leafeon and get the full value from this GX attack, so that we can evolve up into our stage 2s as often as possible and get multiple feather arrows out. Decidueye is still a great attacker in the format. With that amount of HP, he's still very good. Hollow Hunt, obviously not really an option anymore, which is a bit of a drawback to using this GX attack in comparison to something like the Zoroark GX build. That's pretty much where people are sitting right now. They're trying to distinguish whether Zoro Decidueye is better or Leafeon Decidueye is better. And I don't think it's clear-cut either way. I think the decks have slightly different approaches. This one is much more defensive. In my eyes, it's much more reliant on devolving, because you're likely to get 3 or 4 Decidueyes out in matchups, whereas the Zoroark build usually uses Feather Arrow just to increase your Riotous Beating output to KO the active a lot more. So they definitely have different feels to the decks. So yeah, really, really thick Decidueye line. We are still playing a 1-1 Zoroark in our own list. Trade is obviously such a good ability, helps us keep ticking over once we've done this Grand Bloom. And Riotous Beating as well, just a single energy attachment to attack with is very, very good. So we have Leafeon that can attack, Decidueye that can attack, but also single energy attachments on both Zoroark and Tapu Lele GX, so we should be pretty safe there to have enough attacks throughout the game. We do have that one Espeon EX. It is really, really important in the deck. Miraculous Shine, so good for just denying lots of different decks. I'll talk about the matchup spread later on in this video, and Miraculous Shine really important for a lot of those matchups. And then Tapu Lele, just the 2 count, because you want to have your bench full of Pokemon that can evolve, so again that you can increase your Grand Bloom GX value, but at the same time having a couple of copies to get you into Brigette is going to be premium. So yeah, 2 copies of the Lele, so 22 Pokemon in total. That's a pretty high count. Onto the items, we're playing 1 Rescue Stretcher to recover our Pokemon. You could consider playing the Revitalizer, but because things like Zoroark is in the deck, as well as the Espeon, they're both pretty important, so I've gone for the Rescue Stretcher for now. We are going to play 2 copies of Field Blower. We are very, very ability reliant, so Field Blower is going to be important to get rid of Garbodor's tools. And additionally, we're not playing any Stadiums in this list, so this is also the way that we can get rid of things like Parallel City, which could be very, very awkward. And at the same time, we are a tanking deck, so Field Blower getting rid of things like Choice Band can keep things out of range, which is once again very nice. We are going to play 2 copies of Evo Soda, even though we do have that Grand Bloom available. Having a few ways to get into more Decidueyes, getting into your Dartrix. If you go first, sometimes you can do the turn 1 Brigette. Turn 2, you can get multiple Dartrix out, and then you can Grand Bloom the Dartrix into Decidueyes, where it's much more safe. So, and then it simply can't be Guzma because it's at 240 HP. It's really hard for them to deal with it. So Evo Soda gives us a bit more supplementary evolution in there. The deck's all about building up these Decidueyes and as many as possible, so a couple of these in addition is going to be really nice, and it's also good for getting our Zoroark online as well if we're having a slightly awkward start. So pretty good to have a couple more copies in here. It's just a bit more safe this way. We are going to play 3 copies of Max Potion. As I mentioned earlier, this is slightly different to the Zoroark GX variant. I know there are some variants of Zoroark which do play up to 3 Max Potions as well, or sometimes incorporate things like Acerola. But in general, I think it's going to be more staple for the Leafeon deck to play Max Potions, because it is so integral to keep all your Decidueyes, especially, very healthy, because it's not as easy to recycle your Decidueyes because you don't play rare candies, and you don't have the draw engine supplementing you that Zoroark provides. So having these Max Potions going to be really important to keep your Decidueyes around. And in some matchups, because Devolve is simply your win condition, you don't need to attack with many Pokemon. You can just keep Decidueyes in the active position and use your Feather Arrows each turn and just sit there and Max Potion, like a stalling deck in many ways. So 3 Max Potion going to be really important, and is a very nice card in here. Even though we are using the heal of the Leafeon for little pokes here and there, Max Potion is going to do the job in other situations. From there, the 4 copies of Ultra Ball to get us into Lele for Brigette, and also gets us into our evolution lines once we've done that Grand Bloom. So yeah, very nice and supplementary there. And then 3 copies of the Floatstone, very, very important to move into Eevee on your opening turns, so you can get your Grand Bloom GX attack off, and also it's great to have on your Leafeons, so you can move between them and get free heals off. Additionally, very good even on Decidueye, so that you can just sit there in the active and move out of it whenever you need to. So high Floatstone count, really, really important in the deck as well. Onto the supporters, it's very, very simple. We are playing 3 copies of Brigette, just because it's so important to establish this early so that you can use your GX attack as soon as possible. We're going to play 3 copies of Guzma. I know it's a lot higher than usual Decidueye decks, but bear in mind, we no longer have Hollow Hunt available to us, so we have to have the slightly higher count. And then just the staple counts of 4 Sycamore and 4 N. I'm choosing not to play Cynthia in here. You can flirt with the counts of your Sycamores especially. I think 4N will definitely remain in the deck, but Cynthia and Sycamore can be sort of interchangeable here and there. Bear in mind, unlike other Zoroark decks, which have been able to cut down to sometimes 2 Sycamore and incorporate cards like Mallow, because we're only playing 1 Zoroark and it can be knocked out, sometimes we have to attack with it as well, bear in mind. So it is fairly likely to get knocked out during the game. Sycamore feels way more safe in this instance, so I just want to have power draw, get into as many Decidueyes as possible, and start laughing from then on. But you can start thinking about Cynthia. For now, I just wanted the most simple baseline list for you to get testing to see how you like the feel of the deck. But definitely worth considering the Cynthia as the new supporter card, which, for those of you who don't know, allows you to shuffle your hand and just simply draw 6, whereas Sycamore does have some painful discards at times. Bear that in mind. So yeah, really just take your pick on what supporter you like, but for now, a very, very simple count of supporters here. And finally, the energy, once again, quite simple. 9 in total. This is much higher than traditional Decidueye lists, which sometimes play only 6 energy, 2 of them being grass if it's the Zoroark decks, or if it's more traditional Decidueye lists, sometimes they play 3 or 4 grass. 5 is obviously a higher count. We need them to get into our, well, turning Eevees into Leafeon GX is going to be very, very important. And also attacking with our Decidueyes themselves, because the deck is more focused on tanking now that we have the Leafeon GX available. Decidueye just really does improve because of that. So yeah, slightly higher count. I know I've seen a few lists. One of my initial lists actually had up to 8 grass energy in here alongside 4 double colorless. It was just too much. There's too much jank in here. I think having the max potions buys us time, which is much more important overall. And I think because we are playing the 4 Sycamore list, we can dig to find grass energy. You don't necessarily need to Grand Bloom on your first turn. You can wait till the following turn, because we can be passive at times, and it's not too bad if you can just evolve into your Dartrix naturally and then turn them all into Decidueyes. You sometimes lose a turn of a few feather arrows here and there, but it's normally quite manageable. So I think overall 5 is the correct number to round out the energy count of 9 in total. So here is the overall list. You can pause the video now and take a screenshot or do whatever you want to do so you can get testing this. I think overall pretty safe stuff. Nothing really stands out as too awkward. There's not much that's really missing here. There's a few things on the next slide which I can talk about for tech options. But overall I think it's a pretty straightforward deck, and I think that's the way I've always liked to play the deck, especially because there's so much trickery involved with your feather arrows. That's when you can get clever. Just make sure you can get them into play. And that's going to be my policy, really, with this Leafeon GX variant. So let's look at a few different tech options. I think one of the standout things is that we're not playing anything like Tapu Koko or Latios even for some additional spread damage. These can help really push you further towards the Devolve a lot quicker. And this can be very strong. Latios, a very good card right now in the metagame, just because Buzzwole is so important and powerful. So this could be involved, definitely. Right now, I'm not playing Latios because we're not playing choice bands, so the weakness is less relevant when you're only turning 30 to 60, whereas with a choice band, it would be 60 to 120, and that's a big difference. So I think if you were going to fit choice bands in the list and Latios, that would make quite a bit of sense. In general, Tapu Koko is probably good enough just doing the 20 to everything without choice bands, and it also is a free retreater. The main reasons why I'm not playing these cards is simply they don't evolve. They don't become a Decidueye eventually, and the bench space is very precious. Bear in mind, a lot of the time you will have to spend Tapu Lele to get you a Brigette. That way, you're already losing a bench space that can't become, you know, a Zoroark or a Leafeon or a Decidueye. All of these are preferable. So that's why I'm not going to play any of these. They can be good, however, mid-game to just get an extra burst of damage counters on the board pre-Espeon. But overall, I think it's a little bit clunky. There's a few other cards I've experimented with at times. The Palpad's been one that's been a single copy of at times. You can simply cut one of your Sycamores or one of your Guzmas and test out Palpad. At the moment, I think I'm fine without it, but you can minus Guzma plus Palpad and see how it feels for you. There's also the idea of having a few rare candies in the deck to give you some recovery if your Decidueyes do start to get knocked out. There are a few decks and a few new archetypes that do have 1-hit KO potential even on 240 HP Pokemon. So having the recovery and the speedy recovery of getting a Decidueye back alongside rare candy could be preferable. So you're less all in on the Grand Bloom. But again, I think you need to make some spaces in the list to fit multiple, and that can be awkward. Choice Band is very good. I've said a few times at this point that we are much more passive than the Zoroark variant. And I'm preferring Max Potions to Choice Band because ultimately buying yourself more turns nets you more damage because of the amount of Decidueyes you have in play. So that's why I'm not playing Choice Band. A lot of our damage output comes from Feather Arrowing itself, so simply extending the game will get you more damage than Choice Band will overall. But if you want, again, some more burst damage or to have some favorable typing and make it more relevant thanks to Choice Band math, for example, the Latios, I'll go back to being a nice card inclusion if you expect lots of Buzzwole. That could be something you could consider. And another card that I have trialed in the deck has been Super Boost. Super Boost, obviously great when you have multiple stage 2s up in play. You can start attacking with your Decidueye for just one attachment. There's nothing too wrong with this. I think right now, again, I've just made the space for a Max Potion. It was my 10th energy for a little while. It's really nice just to slap it on there and get a 90 that your opponent doesn't expect from a Decidueye. But just as easily, you could simply attack with like Tapu Lele and do a similar amount of damage in most turns. So I think overall, because Super Boost, there'll be times when it's dead. There'll be times when you don't set up optimally and only get 1 or 2 Decidueyes up, or you're having a slow start. The Super Boost isn't going to help you in the same way that something like a basic grass would. I don't think I'd ever go below 5 grass energy, so I don't think it ever takes the space of that. In a similar case, I think DC is still too important as well. So Super Boost feels like slightly weaker than those cards right now. So it's the case of making a space for a 10th energy rather than changing it out for one of your current 9. But I do think it can be powerful, and it has been a card that we have had in the list for a little bit and have eventually cut, but we have seen the power of this Prism Star card and how it can be really, really good to attack with multiple Decidueye. So a quick note on matchups. I've listed just a few of the most popular ones in the format right now, and also on the right side, you can see I've made the little gap there of some potential new archetypes that we'll be looking at least straight off the bat, and there's some others that we need to talk about as well, probably in the future. So just a quick outline of what are some of the worst matchups for this deck. Volcanion obviously going to be awkward. Your Leafeon is ×2 weak to fire, in addition to all of your Decidueyes. Once they start going down, we don't have any rare candies in the list, so our damage output does deplete quite significantly. We do have Zoroark and Tapu Lele to try and keep us in the game, but in general, I think that would be a matchup you're likely to lose. Golisopod Garbodor also sounds pretty awkward. Obviously, the Garbodor part of it isn't going to be great to deal with. We do have a handful of Guzmas, and we have Riotous Beating on our side, so that could be pretty decent. As long as you can deal with the Garbodors without losing the game just on a prize trade basis, it could be okay for you. But Golisopod also has a lot of healing with Acerolas and sometimes even Max Potions on top of that. So that's something that I feel like we should be unfavored against. In a similar way, Drampa Garbodor I think will be pretty awkward against. It's nice that we can heal out of easy 2-hit KOs from the Drampa sometimes with our Leafeon, but that requires, again, Garbodor to be dealt with, and that can be awkward for us at times. So I think Drampa Garb will always be a constant struggle because we only play 2 Field Blowers and we can't GX attack them back if we're reliant on the Grand Bloom. But bear in mind, in those sorts of matchups, you may want to go for a slower Decidueye approach in the first place. The other bad matchup I would consider is another Leafeon variant that we'll talk about later on in a different video. That will be Lurantis Leafeon, just because we can't really go for a Devolve approach, and they probably do more damage output than we do, because they're getting extra heals with their Lurantis GX's attack on top of the Leafeon heals as well. So they probably just out-hit us, and although we have lots of healing, so do they, because they are also packing Leafeons. So I think that would be a pretty awkward matchup. Glaceon, I haven't put as an awkward matchup, because you can get set up. It just depends how the Glaceon stall deck sets up themselves and how disruptive they are with hammers and whatnot. I think that could potentially be another quite bad matchup for this deck, but it really does just depend on what becomes the popular archetype for Glaceon. Myself and Jack, we've come up with a list, and we think it's a good approach, but to be honest, I can't quite put my finger on what the best way to play Glaceon is. We just have a good hunch right now, so it might be one that we have to wait and see to see how bad that matchup is. In theory, it sounds pretty bad, but if you can net yourself turns of Guzma and free yourself of the lock, it could once again swing back in your favor, where you could get a big Devolve playoff on like multiple Glaceons, for example, or even just getting multiple heals off from your own Leafeons can set them back a couple of turns of their own attacks. So it really does depend on what Glaceon's paired with to see how bad that matchup is. And yeah, I think a lot of the other new decks can be troublesome for you, but you have outs to the majority of these as well. So these are my closing thoughts on Leafeon Decidueye. Definitely a much more defensive variant than Decidueye Zoroark. I've been playing Decidueye for a little while. I really like the archetype. I think it is very strong. This definitely has a different feel, much less powerful draw, but having that many birds out in pretty much every game you play is a great feeling to have. Having an extra 60 damage every single turn is great. Having max potion support to give yourself more turns, always great for Decidueye. Having so much control of your damage is a great thing for you. But this definitely is a slower variant. For example, Zoroark could be swinging with Ratus Beating on turn 2, whereas instead we're choosing to do 0 damage and we're just choosing to grab a bunch of Dartrix. So definitely much slower in terms of the damage output. It's a much more defensive archetype, and I think that's the way you have to see this deck. And because of this, it's got a slightly different matchup spread. It's obviously less weak to Buzzwole decks than the Zoroark variant would be, and it's less weak to Devolve because you have your own healing involved as well. So it might be good in mirror matches against the Zoroark variant, but I've not really figured out enough to see if that is the case. But in general, I think it should be slightly favoured against Zoro. That's just a hunch though, and Zoroark being able to draw as many cards as it can probably always has an out to win the game. So, yep. And the final closing thought is that this is definitely like probably a full-on Devolve deck, pretty much. That's how you have to evaluate this deck. We're trying to stall as much as possible, kind of like an old-school Decidueye build when Forest was around. And once again, we're going to be able to build a bunch of Decidueyes up and hope that over a number of turns, we'll be able to control the board with enough healing to overwhelm our opponent, and that is pretty much the goal. Will it turn out better than Zoro? I'm not certain. Definitely much slower. It really does depend on how much Acerola other people are playing and how often they can pull it off, whilst also pressuring you each turn. And how effective the Devolve is in the format is also going to determine how strong Leafeon Decidueye is. For now, though, I do think this could easily be a tier 2 archetype, as Decidueye is just such a powerful Pokemon in his own right. So definitely one to look out for when the new tournaments do begin. Let me know what you guys think about the list and the archetype in general. How strong is Leafeon GX? Is Decidueye the best partner, or are there better things out there to home in on and try and make a list about? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. What did you think of the deck? What else do you want to see from the new format? There's going to be plenty more videos in store for you. You saw on the matchup spread that we had a few ideas jotted down. There's plenty more as well that we're going to be recording. I just didn't want the slide to be too cluttered with lots of different decks that may not end up being too relevant. But yeah, that's going to be it for today, guys. I hope you did enjoy. Leave a like to the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.